Thank you, Karen. Hi, everyone. I am Mike Trocchia, and I'm here to talk to you all about the ever-enthralling exemption number 1 today. So please contain your excitement and feel free to butter that popcorn because the show is about to start. Okay, so from the exemption agenda number 1 meeting held on February 14th, 2019, hard to believe it was a year and a half ago, we carefully listened to and reviewed your input as it is a critical component of the improvement process. As such, the main matters for discussion were the following. The first issue was how to control the uncontrolled millings piles, which are running rampant across the state. You, the valued stakeholders, had told us that this issue is due to the imbalance between supply and demand. Furthermore, you had told us to explore other avenues to use the millings upon, which can be taken literally and metaphorically. Also, it was advised that the solution opportunities should be environmentally sound, as it could be useful to examine how other states manage their millings, and the volume control may also be preferred over the time limit for easier management methods. So please note that these questions, along with the upcoming exemption number 7 and 20 questions, were asked with a slightly different group of stakeholders at the time, and thoughts may have changed since then. So to gain more valuable insight, we will ask similar questions with the help of your feedback and narrow them down to ensure we are focusing on your insights and drilling right down to the core issues at hand here. So we may not be able to hear you all right now, but we hear your intentions loud and clear and only want to assist your efforts to the best of our ability. To that end, we want to make clear the following as well. We will venture to craft the regulations to ensure that your efforts will remain beneficial to the corresponding businesses that you all work with. Also, we will make sure that the opportunities allow for high levels of production, cost effectiveness, and proceed with the respective operations unfettered. As long as you are all willing to work with us to control these piles and other issues, we will do whatever it takes to better the regulations to allow the requested changes to occur. We are here to help in any way and every way that we can. Now, let us move on to the next part of your feedback from the prior meeting. So, getting back to the main matters at hand, limitations to get a solid handle on the uncontrolled millings and methods to better manage this exemption itself were discussed. So, a few facilities have accumulated mountains of asphalt-related millings piles with vegetation such as trees growing out of some of them. Needless to say, that is a bit of a troublesome issue and must be dealt with in a timely fashion to prevent further issues from arising. The volume and time limitations may be the best way to get a handle on this, as mentioned before, and the related issues, with the height limitations being subject to fire codes and local regulations. The final matter for discussion is the intermediate storage provision. This has been in our regulations for a long time, but it has never been requested thus far. Our prior presentation discussed that this provision may be useful for certain situations. We will talk about this more so later on to gain more information to properly refine this activity for the future. All right, let's move on to some background information. Next slide, please. Okay, here is a summary of the exemption itself. So the allowed activities include asphalt manufacturing plant's ability to receive and process the following materials: asphalt millings, asphalt shingles, and other asphalt-based roofing scrap material. Additionally, pallet manufacturers or refurbishers are allowed to process non-salvageable wood pallet-related materials that are generated from their manufacturing and refurbishing operations for a period of 1 year. A bit of a mouthful, but it's important. Now, the less ideal part, but we must discuss the limitations. For asphalt manufacturing plants, the asphalt materials shall be delivered directly to the plant from the site of generation, unless intermediate storage is authorized by the DEP. As mentioned prior, the latter request has yet to occur in any shape, form, or capacity thus far. The principal mannerism intended to handle the Millings Mountains are through the inception and creation of applicable and appropriate limitations in the form of time and volume to tackle these problems effectively. Okay, onward to even more background information. Next slide, please. Let us continue with the basics, shall we? That being said, this exemption is also known as the manufacturer's exemption because it is designed to assist with the smaller recycling operations that are based in manufacturing processes and environments. To date, we have the following records for our exemption applications. We have approximately 10 issued pallet manufacturing exemptions on record, with no major problems having been reported thus far. Let's keep it that way. Also, we have approximately 60 asphalt manufacturing exemptions on record thus far. As mentioned earlier, the mounting piles of asphalt millings are of great concern, which we want to get a handle on to mitigate safety and environmental concerns. Okay, now let's move on to the next exciting chapter in the manufacturer's exemption saga. Next slide, please. As we discussed beforehand, the mountainous piles of asphalt millings across the state of New Jersey are a problem. From the last presentation, we addressed this question prior and received valuable responses to attempt to solve this situation. As the construction business had been booming prior to the pandemic, the piles were anticipated to go down slightly. Luckily, non-essential construction recommenced on May 18th, so this will continue once again and advance the efforts for reducing the piles. Looking once more at that summary, it was made clear that supply does not equal demand here and has led to the gigantic piles being formed that we see today. Furthermore, it was advised that a volume limit would be more useful than a time limit, and it may be more useful as well to examine other states and see how they are handling these kinds of situations. Lastly, it was made clear that ensuring that all of these efforts are conducted in an environmentally sound manner is pivotal to the whole operation. We agree with all of those points and have done our research. To aid the efforts and to supplement our initial questions on this subject, we would like to ask our first main follow-up question set, which will make full use of the Teams polling functionality to ease the question and answer system. As Judy mentioned earlier, the poll questions will appear on the right-hand side once the Q&A chat window has been opened up. Once you click on the link, you will be redirected to a separate screen, which will have all three main questions for this slide within the same window to make things easier. Once you are done answering all three questions, please click the Submit button, and you may then close out of the poll question menu if it does not close automatically. Then, please head back to the presentation window and try not to close it accidentally. It's happened to me a few times, so don't worry about it and don't feel bad. Okay, let's get into the bulk of this and fully divulge the questions at hand here. So, our first question is, how should the department control the uncontrolled millings piles? Should it be A, volume-based, B, time-based, or C, facility production-based? Or D, the type-in functionality through the polling screen. So please answer this question and the ensuing poll questions through the poll question link in the Q&A chat menu as I mentioned before. Please take a minute to answer these questions, and if you don't answer them right away, that is perfectly okay, as the links to these questions will be available for the next 24 hours after this presentation. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So, asphalt millings are brought into the manufacturing process, and we believe that their input may be able to be tied to the hot mix asphalt production rate. With that being said, our next question for you all is, would it be possible to generate reports to allow facilities to create millings storage needs estimates based on hot mix asphalt production rates? Your simplified and suggested answer choices are A, yes, B, no, or C, type in using the polling functionality. Leading off of that subject, our third question overall and final for this slide is, do you foresee any alternative usages for millings? Looking at all of these questions asked thus far, we want those of you affected by this to ponder other potential ideas and means to use this to curb and reduce the giant asphalt millings piles. Our primary concern is the storage of the raw materials, and we want to be able to establish fair and equitable limits based on the asphalt manufacturing plant's capacities, as every plant is different. Lastly, for the come into compliance timeframe, we realize that this is highly operational dependent as each facility is different and unique, and we want to discuss this on an individual basis if it is easier. But does anyone have any other ideas for other uses of millings? We are open to all comments and suggestions here, so do not be afraid to speak your mind verbally through the Q&A functionality screen. If we do not have time for the questions and answers, we will address them later on. Okay, onward to our next storage-based topic. Next slide, please. Following up from where the prior slide left off, we would like to ask the following additional questions to gain more input. So our next question is, should the limits be based on volume or time? For time, what should the throughput capacity limitations be? The choices are a fixed volume, a throughput capacity of a half year to 1 year, a throughput capacity of 1 to 2 years, or a throughput capacity of 2 to 3 years, and of course the type-in option as well. We are doing our absolute best to create these revised regulations with keen attention to your feedback and to make them better for each and everyone involved. Continuing, this ensuing question is concerned with volume this time. So for volume limitations, is it appropriate to impose limitations based on fixed volumes versus equipment capabilities? If so, what would appropriate limitations look like? Your choices are up to 5,000 cubic yards at any given time, up to 10,000 cubic yards at any given time, up to 20,000 cubic yards at any given time, or even all the way up to 30,000 cubic yards at any given time. That's a lot of material. So we endeavor to present as wide a volume range as possible to give you all the opportunities to select an answer that best fits your operational needs. Okay, onward to our next slide. Next slide, please. Now let us go back to another widely discussed topic. So within this exemption, there exists the provision that allows for intermediate storage away from the plant. This request can be granted as long as the desire is properly expressed and circulated to the department and ultimately approved. The problem is no such approval has yet to be requested or issued to date, and no other specific details are included within the regulations behind this matter itself. So our final question for you all is, should the intermediate storage provision be authorized for certain projects? If yes, what kinds of projects would be best for this provision? Your choices are yes for long-term projects, yes for construction-oriented projects, yes for general recycling operations, and no, and there is also the poll fill-in question as well. So the reason behind the proposed removal of this provision is due to lack of use and general ambiguity. As mentioned prior, it was made clear that this provision may be necessary for certain projects, and we simply wish to gain more feedback on that subject. I realize these questions may be difficult to answer at this time and tedious given the meeting setting, but would anyone be willing to explain or type out a practical example in the comments so we may better understand your thoughts on keeping this provision? And if there is not enough time, you may always contact us via telephone or the DEP exempt email, which is mentioned earlier or at the end of the slide set, so that we may discuss the question at length to assist with the endeavor in general. That being said, if you have any other questions and have not done so already, please address them in the Q&A functionality toolbar. And so before we move on, that being said, let's take a quick look at your feedback thus far. So Judy, Anthony, or Tyrone, do we have any pressing, relevant exemption number 1 related questions that can be addressed at this time?
Yes, we do, Mike.
Okay.
Are you able to scroll up to Audrey? I'm sorry. I'm going to find Millings questions. Okay, so there's a question from Ryan Rathburn. With limited outlets to utilize millings, are millings piles not preferable to putting them in landfills?
Well, we'd like to avoid that and make use of them for other positive means and reuse them.
Okay, all right. There's a question regarding exemption number 20. It goes from Audrey Winsinger. Exemption number 20 has always worked well on our various projects, but there have been times when we have had a certain volume of recyclable material on a site. We have recycled 100% of it. We have used much of the resulting finished product, but there has been more finished product than we could use on any of our projects in the short term. Can someone speak to the detriment of allowing the sale of a de minimis amount of finished product? Plus, once it becomes finished product, is it still regulated by the department? Thank you.
So this is Tom Farrell. I'll take that one. We'll be talking about exemption 20 in the next presentation after the next one, actually. But real quick, we're trying to keep a level playing field with the Class B facilities that are charged very high fees to have that permit. So that was really the thinking about that. But we'll entertain any more back and forth at the end of exemption 20 presentation.
Okay. I'm sorry. All right. Okay. That's all I have for now.
Okay. And yeah, like Tom said, we'll talk about exemption 7 and exemption 20 more so later on. So don't worry, those questions will be answered. Okay. So that is all the time we have for questions right now. So continuing on, we will move on to the ever exciting exemption number 7 portion of the presentation. And hang on as Tom Farrell will take it away. Go ahead, Tom.